I am Candace, 31 years old. On the night of our company's annual gala, I stood frozen under the blinding stage lights, my boss smiling smugly as he accepted an award for a campaign I had built from scratch. The crowd erupted in applause, cameras flashing while my name was never mentioned. The ballroom smelled of champagne and expensive perfume, golden chandeliers reflecting off crystal glasses. My colleagues clapped, some glancing at me with pity, others pretending not to notice the way my hands trembled around the untouched flute of champagne. My boss, Raymond, held the trophy high, saying, "This was a triumph of leadership and vision. My leadership. My vision. Yet here I was, shrinking into the shadows while he basked in glory that didn't belong to him. I felt my cheeks flush as the stage lights burned against my skin. My heart pounded, not with pride but with humiliation so raw I thought I might choke. The campaign had been my baby. Late nights, skipped meals, endless revisions until it was perfect. And here was Raymond, holding the fruit of my labor like it had always been his. I could still hear his smooth baritone voice echoing in the cavernous ballroom. "Innovation is about courage," he told the audience, as if those were his sleepless nights, his ideas scribbled on napkins at 3 a.m., his tears when deadlines nearly crushed me. People laughed at his jokes, impressed by his charisma, while my stomach twisted tighter with each passing second. When he stepped off the stage, reporters swarmed around him. He shook hands, gave them quotes, promised to share his vision in more detail. I tried to slip past the crowd, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor, but I couldn't avoid the whispers. "That was Candace's project, wasn't it?" One junior associate muttered. "Yeah," another replied, lowering her voice. "But Raymond's the one with power. What can she do?" Their words sliced through me, leaving me hollow. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I left the ballroom early that night, walking alone down Fifth Avenue. The city glittered with neon lights, taxis honking, steam rising from subway grates, yet everything felt muted, distant, as though I were moving underwater. My phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from colleagues who assumed I was celebrating. Instead, I wandered until my feet ached, the sting of betrayal gnawing at me with every step. Growing up in Queens, I never imagined I'd end up here, working for one of Manhattan's top tech marketing firms. My parents, Cuban immigrants, had always pushed me to work harder than everyone else. "People like us don't get handouts, Candace," my father used to say, his voice gravelly after long shifts driving a cab. "We earn every inch," I had taken his words to heart. Scholarships got me through college. Internships turned into full-time positions. I clawed my way into this career with grit, determination, and creativity. I wasn't the smartest in every room, but I was the most relentless. That relentlessness had landed me the lead role in the campaign that changed everything for our firm. Or so I thought. Raymond had always been a smooth talker, a man with the kind of charm that could sell ice to Eskimos. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that made people want to believe him. When he spoke in meetings, clients leaned forward mesmerized. But behind the gloss, I knew the truth. He rarely did the actual work. He delegated, absorbed credit, and thrived on other people's sweat. At first, I convinced myself that was just leadership. "That's how the corporate world works," I told myself when he brushed my name off slides during presentations. It's not personal, but deep down I knew it was. He saw me as a threat, young, driven, with ideas that resonated. Instead of mentoring me, he clipped my wings and claimed my flight as his own. The campaign that had won him the award started as a passion project of mine, a rebrand strategy for a struggling software client. I'd poured everything into it, analyzing data, interviewing users, designing visuals, even writing copy late into the night. When it gained traction, when clients praised it, Raymond began inserting himself more and more. At first it was subtle. "We should present this together," he'd say. Then it became blatant. "I'll handle the client meeting, Candace." "Don't worry," I worried. I knew what it meant, and tonight, my fears had been realized. He had erased me completely. I sat in my small apartment later that night, staring at my laptop. My inbox pinged with congratulatory messages to him, not me. LinkedIn was full of posts tagging Raymond, praising his brilliance. I scrolled until my hands shook. My name wasn't anywhere. Not once. I thought of calling my parents, but what could I say? That their daughter had worked herself to the bone, only to be invisible. That the American dream had a fine print I hadn't noticed, that someone else could take it from you in the blink of an eye. I wanted to scream, to smash my laptop against the wall, to throw my phone into the Hudson River. Instead, I curled into myself on the couch, tears soaking the blanket. Betrayal has a way of silencing you before it strengthens you. That night, I felt only the silence. The next morning, I dragged myself into the office. The glass towers of Midtown sparkled in the morning sun, mocking me. Inside, people buzzed with energy, congratulating Raymond as he strutted through the halls with his trophy under his arm. He winked at me as if daring me to speak. "Great job last night," one coworker whispered, patting my shoulder. Her eyes flicked nervously toward Raymond before she added, "You deserve it more than him." We all know it, did they? If they knew, why didn't anyone say it out loud? Why was I the only one suffocating under this silence? That's when I realized silence served him. My silence, their silence. Every unspoken word was another brick in the fortress protecting him. I clenched my fists at my desk, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. If no one else would speak for me, then I'd have to find a way to speak for myself. But not yet. For now, I swallowed my rage, buried it under polite smiles, and kept working. On the outside, I looked like the diligent employee I'd always been. On the inside, though, a fire was building, slow, steady, and unstoppable. Raymond thought he had stolen my spotlight for good. What he didn't know was that he had lit the fuse of a reckoning that would cost him everything. The morning after the gala, the office buzzed with a sickly kind of excitement, the kind that follows power. People gathered around Raymond's glass-walled office, laughing too loudly, congratulating him as though he'd just cured cancer. His award sat proudly on his desk, catching the morning sunlight and scattering it across the floor like sharp little shards of glass. I watched from my cubicle, pretending to focus on my screen, though my hands hovered uselessly over the keyboard. My inbox was flooded with new campaign assignments, most of them signed off by Raymond, delegating work he'd never touch. "Great work on the award campaign," one email read. "Looking forward to what you and Raymond do next." You and Raymond. The words made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream that there was no you and Raymond. There had only ever been me. When I finally gathered the courage to step into his office, he didn't even look up from his computer. "Ah, Candace," he said, his tone smooth as silk. "You saw the award?" "Hard not to," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "Congratulations," he smirked. "Team effort, right?" The phrase burned. My jaw tightened. Except I didn't get mentioned once. Not in your speech. Not in the press release. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Candace, you're young. You've got plenty of time for the spotlight. Right now, what you need is exposure, experience. Being part of a winning team looks good on you. Don't make this about credit." My heart pounded in my ears. "It was my work," he shrugged, that smug little half-smile never leaving his face. "Perception is reality. And right now, reality says this firm succeeds because of my leadership. You should be thanking me for bringing your ideas to life." I stared at him, speechless. My pulse throbbed in my temples. Thanking him? For erasing me? That was the moment I realized Raymond wasn't just manipulative. He was a professional thief. Not of wallets or jewelry, but of recognition. He knew exactly how to steal other people's light and make them thank him for the shadow. When I left his office, I could feel eyes on me. A few coworkers offered sympathetic looks, the kind that said, "I know, but I can't help you." Others avoided my gaze altogether. Corporate fear, it's a language spoken fluently in glass buildings. The next few weeks blurred into one long humiliation. Raymond began using my project as a case study in internal meetings, talking about his visionary approach. I sat in the back of the room, my chest tight, as he explained ideas that had come straight from my notes, even quoting phrases I'd written. "Brilliant work. Raymond," our CEO said once, clapping him on the back. "You've raised the bar." Raymond smiled graciously. "It's all about cultivating a great team, he replied, glancing at me for just a second. The kind of glance that says, "Stay quiet, or I'll bury you." After that meeting, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and cried silently, tears dripping onto my phone as I scrolled through old campaign drafts, every slide, every slogan with my fingerprints all over it. It was all there, proof that I had built everything he was now taking credit for. But in this office, proof meant nothing without power. One afternoon, I overheard two senior managers chatting near the coffee station. "Raymond's unstoppable right now," one said. "He's being considered for a VP position," the other chuckled. "No surprise, he knows how to get results. The board loves him." I wanted to interrupt to tell them who had actually produced those results, but my voice caught in my throat. Would they even believe me? Or would they label me as bitter, jealous, ungrateful? The usual names women got when they challenged authority. Later that week, HR announced a round of promotions. My name wasn't on the list. Raymond's favorite assistant, however, a bubbly, inexperienced woman named Tessa, was promoted to junior strategist. The same title I had held before my campaign blew up. I stared at the announcement email for a long time, my hands trembling over the keyboard. When I looked up, Tessa was walking toward me, holding a cupcake. "Raymond told me to share these with the team," she chirped. I smiled thinly. "How thoughtful." "He said you were a big part of the last campaign," she added innocently. "He really values you, you know." I almost laughed. Values me? Raymond valued my silence. He valued that I was too ethical, too polite, too loyal to fight back. Yet, the injustice kept piling on. During one client call, he made me mute my mic so he could handle the talking. Later, the same client emailed him to say how impressed they were with his creative direction. When I congratulated him, because that's what you do when you're trying to survive, he grinned and said, "Stick with me, Candace. You'll go far. Stick with him." It was the same tone predators use when they're taming prey. But the final straw came one Friday evening. I had stayed late, as usual, perfecting a proposal for a new product launch. It was flawless, market data, brand visuals, copy that hit like electricity. At 10 p.m., I emailed it to him. The following Monday, he called a department-wide meeting. My stomach sank when I saw the slides on the screen. My proposal, my words, my graphics, but with his name in the footer. As the room erupted in applause, I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. I looked around, hoping someone would speak up. No one did. After the meeting, I confronted him again. "You crossed the line, Raymond," I said, voice shaking. "That was my work." He smirked, leaning against the conference table. "And it got approved, didn't it? Don't be naive, Candace. The higher-ups only remember the face that presents, not the one that prepares. If you want to make it in this business, you better learn that." I stepped closer, trembling with rage. "You're not a leader. You're a thief," he chuckled, eyes narrowing. "Careful. Words like that could end your career." That's when I understood what kind of man he really was. Not just corrupt, but dangerous. I left work early that day, shaking with anger and humiliation. On the subway ride home, I stared at my reflection in the window, pale, tired, but burning with a new kind of resolve. Maybe he was right about one thing. Perception was power, but perception could be changed. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have money, influence, or allies, but I had the truth, and I had time. And slowly a thought began to form, small, fragile, but sharp. If Raymond could manipulate the system to erase me, maybe I could learn to use that same system to destroy him. Not through anger, through strategy. That night, I opened my laptop and began to build a new folder, one that I titled quietly, Project Reclaim. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was the beginning, and this time, I wasn't going to play fair. The Monday after the product launch felt like walking into a movie where everyone else had read the script but me. My inbox was overflowing with congratulations. Not for me, of course, but for Raymond. "Another masterpiece," one email read. "The man's a marketing genius." My managing genius was currently in the break room, basking in applause while sipping coffee like a king who'd just conquered another kingdom. The office air smelled like roasted beans and ego. I could hear his voice even from my desk. Loud, charming, rehearsed. "She was great support," he said to someone. "Really helped polish my vision." Polish his vision. The words made bile rise in my throat. I turned back to my computer, but the cursor blinked like an accusation. I'd spent months building that campaign from nothing. Crafting the messaging, designing every tagline, even coordinating with the client's data team for insight. Raymond had swooped in only when it was done, slapped his name on it, and presented it like it was his divine inspiration, and everyone believed him. That morning, our CEO sent out an internal memo. I remember every word. Raymond's leadership on the new campaign has set a new standard for our marketing division. His vision reflects the innovation this company stands for. We're proud to announce that he will be heading our expansion into the European market. The email hit me like a punch. My vision, my campaign, was now his passport to a promotion. I sat frozen for a long time. Around me, keyboards clacked, phones rang, laughter rippled. But I couldn't move. My stomach twisted so hard it felt like I might be sick. Then came the knock on my cubicle wall. Raymond stood there smiling, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," he said casually, setting one on my desk. I stared at it. "You got promoted." He tilted his head, pretending humility. "I did. Crazy, right? Europe. Big move. They'll need someone to take my place here, though. I'll be recommending you." I blinked, trying to process. "Recommending me? After you—" I stopped myself before finishing. "After I what?" His eyes gleamed, daring me to say it. I swallowed hard. "After you stole my work." His smirk didn't waver. "Candace, you're talented. No one's denying that. But you're also emotional. Impulsive. You need to learn how the game works if you want to survive." I clenched my fists under the desk. "You mean how to lie?" He leaned closer, voice dropping. "I mean how to win. And if you're smart, you'll stop fighting me and start learning from me." That was it. The moment something inside me snapped. The betrayal wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal, intimate. Like he'd looked inside my chest and decided my dignity was collateral damage. When he finally walked away, I sat there shaking. Not from fear, but from clarity. I realized what I had become in his eyes. An asset to exploit, a threat to control, and eventually, a problem to erase. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my small Manhattan apartment, staring at the city lights flickering across the skyline. Each light looked like a lie. 100 stories of people pretending everything was fine while swallowing injustice. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. "Hi, Mija. Haven't heard from you in a bit. Everything okay at work?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing, "Yeah, everything's fine." It wasn't fine. It was war. The next few days passed in a haze. Raymond continued his victory lap, scheduling farewell lunches, basking in compliments, shaking hands with people who didn't know they were clapping for a fraud. But while he celebrated, I observed, quietly, every interaction, every smug comment, every careless detail. I started recording it all in a hidden file on my work laptop titled Notes. I noted who he emailed, which clients he referenced, even timestamps of when he accessed shared documents. I wasn't sure what I was looking for yet, but I knew if he had stolen my work, he'd probably stolen from others too. The first real clue came during a conference call with one of our oldest clients, Bright Loop Energy. I'd handled their account for months before Raymond swooped in. During the call, he mentioned a client-side concept that sounded eerily familiar, a strategy Bright Loop had never actually suggested, but one that I had brainstormed privately in my drafts. That was the spark. If he was using my unreleased work for external presentations, he was leaving a trail. After the call, I combed through the shared company folders. It took hours, but finally I found it. A file labeled Energy Strategy Draft Raymond V2. The timestamp was from the night before the presentation, but the metadata told the truth. It had been copied from my personal directory. My directory. He hadn't just stolen my ideas. He'd literally copied my files. rebranded them, and submitted them under his own name. For a long minute, I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the document. Every word, every graph, every chart was mine. I remember whispering to myself, "He's really that bold." I printed the document and slipped it into a folder. Then another idea hit me. If he was this careless, there might be more. I started cross-checking other campaign folders. Within hours, I found 3 more projects that bore my original drafts, with slight edits but unmistakably mine. Each discovery felt like another piece of oxygen returning to my lungs. For the first time, I wasn't powerless. I had evidence, but I also knew evidence meant nothing if used wrong. Raymond had connections. The company worshipped him. If I accused him outright, he'd twist it, make me look unstable, jealous, insubordinate. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to be smarter. Over takeout boxes and red wine, I showed her the files. Her eyes widened. Holy hell, Candace. This is theft. Straight up theft. I know, I said quietly. But if I take this to HR without backup, he'll bury me. She nodded, tapping her nails against the wine glass. Then we need proof they can't ignore. Something public. Something they have to act on. That's when the idea began to take shape. Not just to expose him, but to destroy the illusion he'd built. Raymond lived by perception. So I would use perception to break him. The next week, I started setting traps. Subtle ones. During meetings, I began asking innocent-sounding questions that forced him to explain his strategies in detail. When he stumbled or contradicted himself, I took notes. When he tried to deflect credit again, I smiled sweetly and said things like, "Yes." That was in my original draft. Each time, his jaw tightened. It wasn't enough yet, but it was the beginning of his unraveling. Then one afternoon, a strange email landed in my inbox. An anonymous message with a single sentence. "You're not the first he's done this to." Attached was a PDF. An old campaign proposal from 2 years ago. Identical in format to mine, but with another employee's name faintly visible under the metadata. My breath caught. There were others. Raymond hadn't just stolen from me. He'd made a career out of it. As I stared at the screen, the fear that had lived in my chest for months finally cracked. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dramatic. I was right. And that realization didn't fill me with relief. It filled me with fire. I whispered to myself, voice trembling but sure. "You picked the wrong woman to underestimate, Raymond." And for the first time since this all began, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you show to survive. The kind of smile that comes right before you strike. The office didn't turn against me overnight. It was slower, quieter, like a tide rising without warning until you realize you're drowning. At first, it was small things. A joke I wasn't invited to, a meeting that somehow got rescheduled without me on the thread. Colleagues who used to greet me in the morning now gave polite nods, eyes flicking away before I could say hello. It didn't take long to understand why. Raymond's promotion announcement had come with a narrative, and he was careful about how he told it. "She's talented," he'd say, voice dripping with charm. "But she's temperamental. You know how creatives are." He was poisoning the well with compliments. Death by reputation. The first real blow came during the weekly marketing sync. I had presented early drafts for a new campaign idea, one I'd been quietly developing to rebuild my credibility after the last ordeal. But halfway through my pitch, Raymond interrupted from across the conference call, his voice smooth and dismissive. "Candace, I'm not sure this aligns with our current brand direction," he said. "Didn't we discuss this last month? Maybe you should revisit your notes before presenting next time." Laughter rippled across the speakerphone. I froze, blinking at the screen. "We didn't discuss this, actually. This is an entirely new—" He cut me off. "Let's circle back later. We're short on time." The meeting moved on, leaving me silenced in front of 20 muted squares on Zoom. My chest burned as I clicked, "Leave meeting." By the time I looked at my phone, there were already messages. "Tough meeting. You okay? Maybe just let him lead until things cool off." It was like watching my professional identity crumble in real time. Every achievement I'd worked for, erased under the weight of his narrative. I started eating lunch alone, taking my breaks in the stairwell instead of the lounge. The chatter that used to fill my days had thinned into whispers behind my back. Every sound, a phone notification, a door creak, a laugh from down the hall, felt like a reminder that I was being watched. Judged, excluded, and then came the accident. One morning, I logged into my project folder, the same one where I'd stored all my research notes and client data, only to find it empty. Completely wiped. Panic surged through me. I checked my backups, but even those were corrupted. It didn't make sense. Unless, I swallowed hard, unless someone had deleted them. My hands shook as I called it. "There's been a problem," I said. "All my files are missing from the shared drive." The technician paused before replying. "Yeah, we noticed. Looks like your access was restricted last night." "What? Why?" "Manager authorization. We can't restore without approval." "Manager authorization." Raymond. That evening, I stayed late, sitting alone in the dim office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like dying fireflies. Outside, the city's glow pressed against the windows, indifferent to my quiet unraveling. I stared at the blank folders on my computer and felt something inside me break. Not in defeat, but in realization they wanted me gone. The next day confirmed it. HR called me in for a check-in. The representative, a young woman with a too-tight smile, slid a paper across the desk. "We've received feedback about your recent conduct," she said softly. "Some concerns about collaboration and communication style." I blinked. "From who?" She didn't answer directly. "We just want to ensure you're fostering a positive team environment." A positive team environment. That was corporate code for you're being labeled a problem. I left the meeting in silence, my mind spinning. HR wasn't neutral. They never were. Raymond had them in his pocket. He'd built his entire career on perception, and now he was using it to bury me. For a week straight, I went home every night on the verge of collapse. My apartment, once my sanctuary, started feeling like a cell. The city noise outside, the hum of traffic, even the faint laughter from the neighboring units, it all grated on me. I would stare at my reflection in the window and whisper, "How did I become this invisible?" Mariah tried to lift me up. One night she came over with takeout again, plopping herself on my couch. "You can't let him win," she said between bites of lo mein. "You've got the evidence, right?" "Keep building. Let him think you're beaten," I sighed. "I don't even know if it's enough. He's careful. He's got everyone wrapped around his finger." "Then get someone who's not," she replied firmly. "You said there were others. If that anonymous message was real, someone else has been burned. Find them. Together, you're louder." The idea planted itself like a seed, but exhaustion dulled my fire. Weeks of silence and manipulation had worn me down. Every morning, I'd wake up thinking about quitting. Maybe it would be easier to just walk away. Start somewhere new. Build again. But then I'd remember his words. "You need to learn how the game works if you want to survive." And something in me hardened. I wasn't built to surrender. One night, around midnight, I found myself scrolling through old employee directories, searching names I vaguely remembered, people who had worked under Raymond years ago. One stood out, Nicole Tran, a former campaign designer who had mysteriously resigned after only 8 months. I hesitated, then typed her name into LinkedIn. Her profile popped up. Freelance consultant now, based in Boston. I sent a message before I could overthink it. "Hi, Nicole. I know we've never met, but I think we have a mutual connection. Raymond Keller. I need to ask you something about your time at Quantum Strategies." I didn't expect an answer that night, but 15 minutes later the little dot appeared. Oh, him. What did he do this time? My pulse quickened. He stole my campaign. Maybe more than one. I think he's done it before. There was a pause. Then he did the same to me. I had proof, but HR shut me down. They called it a miscommunication. I still have the files, though. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. "Can you send them to me?" "I will, just be careful. He plays dirty." When the files arrived, I opened them immediately. Same structure, same wording style, same formatting, just like mine. He'd been recycling other people's work for years. That was the moment my exhaustion burned away. The loneliness, the humiliation, the whispers, all of it transformed into something sharp and focused. I wasn't fighting for validation anymore. I was fighting for justice. The next morning, I walked into the office with my chin high. Raymond glanced at me from his glass corner office, probably wondering how I still had the nerve to show up. He smiled mockingly. "Rough week?" I smiled back, calm and steady. "You have no idea." He didn't know it yet, but the isolation he'd crafted around me had backfired. Because in that silence, I had found something he couldn't touch. Clarity. And soon, I would turn that clarity into his undoing. The next few days felt like the calm before a storm. Except I was the storm, and no one had noticed yet. Every morning I arrived at the office early, long before Raymond and his entourage of yes people. The building at that hour was eerily peaceful. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant buzz of the espresso machine downstairs, the muffled whir of the HVAC system. It was the only time I could think clearly. I'd sit at my desk with my laptop, sifting through the files Nicole had sent me. Each document was a mirror of my own work. Same creative flow, same phrasing, even the same typo I'd once made intentionally to track plagiarism. She had labeled her campaign Project Lumen. Mine had been Project Rise. Both had been submitted under Raymond's name. He'd been doing this for years, stealing ideas from women who trusted him, presenting them as his own, then pushing them out under the guise of performance issues. As I pieced the timeline together, I could almost hear him rehearsing his lies. She wasn't a team player. She was difficult. She couldn't handle feedback. It was a pattern, one designed to protect him while erasing us. The more I saw, the calmer I became. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a blueprint for destruction. My anger sharpened into purpose. I called Nicole again. "These files," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "They're gold. Do you still have the original emails or metadata?" "Yeah," she replied. "I kept backups on an external drive. I couldn't prove anything back then, because I didn't know what I was looking for. But you might actually have enough to make this stick." I smiled faintly. "Then let's make it stick." Over the next week, we worked in secret. Late-night Zoom calls, encrypted file transfers, whispered conversations over burner emails. Every detail we uncovered added another crack to Raymond's perfect facade. We discovered at least 5 women whose projects he'd stolen. Each story followed the same rhythm: enthusiasm, collaboration, sudden dismissal, and silence. Most had signed non-disclosure agreements to protect company integrity. I knew those NDAs weren't about integrity. They were gag orders. By Friday night, I had a digital folder labeled the Keller file. It contained everything: timelines, signatures, email chains, metadata stamps, and even audio recordings of his coaching sessions. Thinly veiled manipulation sessions he had with junior employees. But having proof wasn't enough. I needed strategy. If I went to HR, they'd bury it. If I went public too early, he'd spin it as a personal vendetta. No, I needed precision. That's when I reached out to Jonah, a friend from college who now worked as a journalist covering corporate misconduct. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I sent him a message with the subject line, "You'll want to see this," he replied within minutes. We met at a quiet coffee shop near Madison Avenue, the kind of place where people spoke in low tones and pretended not to eavesdrop. He looked exactly the same. Dark eyes, notebook always half filled. That same hungry curiosity that had made him the best investigative reporter in our journalism class. "Candace?" he asked, sliding into the booth. "You look like someone who's about to blow something up." I gave a small, tired smile. "You're not far off." He leaned forward. "Tell me everything." I laid it all out: Raymond's pattern, the stolen campaigns, the NDAs, the gaslighting. I showed him the documents, the side-by-side comparisons, the proof that the same metadata appeared across projects he'd claimed as his own. Jonah's expression darkened. "This is systemic theft. If you can get at least one more person to go on record, I can run this story. But it has to be airtight. Nicole will back it, I said quickly. And there are others. I'll find them, he nodded. Do it, and be careful. If he gets wind of this, he'll try to destroy you before the story breaks. I left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The air outside felt colder, sharper, cleaner. For the first time in months, I felt like I was walking towards something instead of running away. But Raymond wasn't stupid. He could sense when control was slipping, and I knew the walls around me would start to shake soon. The following Monday, he called me into his office. "Close the door," he said, voice smooth as silk. The blinds were half drawn, slanting sunlight across his desk. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "I've been hearing things, Candace. Rumors." I kept my face neutral. "About?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. "About you. About your dissatisfaction. You've been spending a lot of time outside the office, making calls. Is there something I should know?" The air between us thickened. I tilted my head. "Are you asking if I'm planning to leave or if I'm planning to expose you?" He froze for just a second. A flicker, but enough for me to see it. Then he laughed. "You're paranoid. Maybe you need some time off. You've been under pressure." "I'm fine," I said flatly. "And I'm not paranoid. I just finally see things clearly." His smile faded. "Careful, Candace. Ambition is admirable, but delusion? That's career suicide," I stood. "Guess we'll see who survives." For the rest of the day, I worked in silence, aware of his eyes on me through the glass. Every keystroke, every message, monitored. I had become the threat, and he knew it. That night, I sent Jonah the names of 3 other women. 2 agreed to speak anonymously. One, a former analyst named Priya, agreed to go public if needed. We built our case piece by piece. Jonah worked quietly with his editor to verify everything, while I played the role of the subdued employee. Polite, apologetic, back to normal. But the calm cracked 2 weeks later. It was 8:30 p.m. when my phone buzzed. A text from Jonah, he knows. Someone tipped him off. "Lay low for now. Don't go to the office tomorrow." My stomach dropped. I stared at the message. Heart pounding. I knew what was coming. Retaliation. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to an email from HR. Subject, urgent meeting request, compliance review. The word compliance made my blood run cold. It meant they were turning the tables, trying to make me the problem. For the first time, I felt real fear. Not anger, not frustration, and fear. Because corporate revenge wasn't like personal revenge. It came wrapped in policies and professionalism, with smiling faces that ruined you on paper. I called Jonah immediately. "He's coming after me," I said, voice trembling. "Hold on," he replied. "We're finalizing the story. Don't give them what they want. Stay calm. Keep every document, every email. We'll publish within 48 hours, 2 days. That was all I had to survive. I hung up and sank into my couch, staring at the ceiling. My career was hanging by a thread. My name was being smeared, and the company I had once loved was ready to gut me for daring to tell the truth. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the fear, I felt something else. Power. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one trapped in his game. He was trapped in mine. And soon the world would see him for what he truly was. The HR conference room had always smelled like anxiety and lemon-scented disinfectant. That morning, it was suffocating. 3 people sat across from me, Raymond at the head, pretending calm authority. Jessica from HR with her professional half-smile, and a compliance officer I'd never seen before, his laptop open and recording. "Candace," Jessica began softly, "we've received some concerning reports about your conduct. It seems you've been accessing confidential materials unrelated to your department." I folded my hands. I was reviewing campaign archives for cross-department insights. "You know, the work I actually did before it was stolen." Raymond's smile tightened. "Let's not make this personal. We're here to protect company integrity." Company integrity. I almost laughed. They accused me of violating privacy, breaching internal policy, and undermining leadership trust. In other words, they were setting up my termination. When Jessica handed me a thin folder labeled Employee Conduct Inquiry, I stared at it without touching it. "So this is how you clean your messes now?" I asked quietly. Raymond leaned forward, his tone patronizing. "Candace, you're talented. But lately you've let emotion cloud your judgment. You're making enemies where you don't need to." "I didn't make enemies," I said. "You made yourself one." The silence that followed was the kind that eats sound, thick, dangerous. I walked out of the room feeling numb. The whisper started before I even reached my desk. Colleagues avoided my eyes. Slack messages went unanswered. My ID card glitched at the printer, like even the system wanted me gone. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. That night I met Jonah again, this time in his office at the paper. The room smelled like ink and stale coffee, a chaos of folders and post-its. He looked up as I entered. "You okay?" "I've been officially targeted," I said. "They're building a fake compliance case," he sighed. "That means you got to them. We're close, Candace. The piece is almost done, but we need a public spark. Something that forces people to look before they can bury it." "What kind of spark?" "Something they can't silence." He turned his screen toward me. It showed a draft headline: "Award-winning executive accused of exploiting female staff for career gain. Multiple sources speak out." Underneath, I saw snippets of testimony. Nicole's, Priya's, mine. Dates, evidence, documents. It was all there. I felt my chest tighten. "When will it go live?" "Soon," he said. "But you need to stay out of their trap. If they fire you for misconduct, it'll muddy the story. They'll say you're just bitter." I nodded. "Then I'll play quiet." Over the next week, I performed silence like an art form. I arrived early, smiled at coworkers, pretended to focus on new campaigns. I even sent Raymond polite email updates about progress. Every reply from him was laced with condescension, as if he believed the leash was back on. But behind that mask, I was working with precision. Each night, I uploaded more evidence to Jonah, timestamps, HR communications, Slack screenshots showing favoritism and manipulation. Nicole helped from the shadows, pretending to mentor new hires, while quietly sending me old files from the shared drive. The story was evolving beyond us now. Jonah said his editor had pitched it to a national syndicate. If it got approved, it would break the following Monday, exactly 1 week from my HR ambush. 7 days. 7 days to keep the illusion alive. But illusions don't last. On Wednesday, Raymond called me into his office again. He was alone this time. The blinds were half drawn, and his tone was strangely calm. "I want to give you an opportunity," he said. "I know we've had friction, but I'd hate to see you throw away your future over misunderstandings." I stared at him. "What kind of opportunity?" He slid a document across the desk, a resignation agreement. "If you leave quietly," he said, "we'll give you a month severance and a neutral reference. You walk away, no stains on your record." I glanced at the paper. My name was typed neatly at the top, like I'd already signed away my dignity. "Let me guess," I said. "And if I don't?" He met my eyes, smile gone. "Then we'll have to protect the company. HR will finalize its investigation. You know how these things go. Once your reputation's questioned, it doesn't matter what's true anymore." The threat landed like a slap. I stood slowly. "You've stolen my work. You've humiliated women who trusted you. And you still think you're untouchable." He gave a slight smirk. "Because I am." I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not for long." That night I texted Jonah. He offered a severance. "The story needs to hit fast." He replied instantly. "We're greenlit. Monday morning, 7 a.m. front page." The final countdown had begun. Thursday passed in a blur. HR sent follow-ups. Raymond smiled in hallways like he'd already won. The office gossip machine spun harder. I could feel their eyes on me. The unstable woman, the problem employee. Friday evening I stayed late. Most of the office was empty, save for the faint hum of air vents and the occasional flicker of the exit light. I opened my laptop one last time and wrote my final company email. To the team. Working here taught me a lot. Mostly what kind of people I'll never be again. Some truths can't stay buried forever. Candace, I hit send. Logged off and left my badge on the desk. As I stepped outside, The night air felt electric. My reflection in the glass door looked different. Steadier, sharper, alive. Saturday morning, Jonah texted. They're nervous. Keller's PR team reached out to the paper asking if any stories were being prepared about him. He knows something's coming, I smiled. Let him sweat. That weekend I stayed home. No social media, no phone calls. Just silence and tea and the sound of distant traffic. But inside me, tension built like a live wire. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept picturing the headline, imagining his face as his empire cracked open. At 6:59 a.m., Monday, I sat in my kitchen, laptop open, fingers trembling. The article went live at exactly 7. Jonah's text came seconds later. It's out. Front page. They're finished. I clicked the link. There it was. Raymond Keller's face plastered under the headline. Top marketing executive exposed for exploiting female staff. Whistleblower evidence reveals pattern of theft and abuse. My breath hitched. The story was brutal, detailed, undeniable. It named the women, cited the evidence, exposed the manipulation, screenshots, timestamps, NDAs, everything. Within an hour, the company's internal Slack exploded. Colleagues sent panicked messages. The board issued a formal investigation. Clients began withdrawing contracts. And by noon, an emergency email was sent out company-wide. Subject: Interim Leadership Announcement. Raymond Keller was stepping down effective immediately. I closed my laptop and exhaled. For the first time, fully, the storm had arrived. And this time, I wasn't its victim. By the time I reached the office that Monday morning, the building felt different. The glass doors that once gleamed with self-importance now reflected tension. Security guards stood stiff by the elevators, murmuring into their earpieces. People gathered in hushed clusters, scrolling through their phones, whispering my boss's name like it was radioactive. When I stepped off the elevator, all eyes lifted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Is it true? One of the interns whispered. Read it yourself, another hissed, holding up their phone. It's everywhere. Everywhere. Jonah hadn't exaggerated. The story had gone viral within hours. Major outlets picked it up. LinkedIn was ablaze with leadership accountability posts, the kind people write to sound noble while enjoying the gossip. And every photo, every name, every accusation pointed to Raymond Keller, the golden executive, the face of integrity, the man who'd built his success on stealing from women like me. I walked toward my desk. Every step deliberate, silent, powerful. Raymond's office door was closed. The blinds were shut. A single printed headline lay abandoned on a coworker's desk nearby. The fall of a corporate hero. I almost laughed. Minutes later, HR called an all-hands emergency meeting. The conference room buzzed with fear. Raymond didn't show up. Jessica from HR looked pale, her usual calm replaced with a kind of jittery, rehearsed sympathy. As you may have seen, she began, voice trembling slightly, there's an article circulating regarding serious allegations against one of our executives. The board has launched an independent review. Independent? Someone scoffed. He's already gone viral. You think people believe in reviews anymore? Jessica's lips tightened. We ask that everyone refrain from speculating publicly. Too late, someone else muttered. Phones kept buzzing, screens lighting up with fresh updates. The company's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Clients were withdrawing contracts. Recruiters were calling ex-employees for statements. The empire was crumbling, beautifully, perfectly, exactly as planned. When the meeting adjourned, I stayed behind. Jessica caught my eye. Her expression flickered. Guilt, fear, realization. She motioned for me to wait. Candace, she said quietly once the room cleared. You knew something, didn't you? I tilted my head. You mean about the man you all protected? Her shoulders sagged. We had no proof. We were told to trust leadership. Proof? I asked. You didn't want proof. You wanted silence. She didn't respond. Just walked away, heels echoing like the sound of retreat. I sat alone for a while, staring at the skyline through the window. For years I'd watched that same view, the glitter of ambition, the illusion of progress. But now, for the first time, it didn't feel out of reach. At noon, my phone rang. It was Jonah. "You seeing the news?" he said, voice bright. "I'm living it," I replied. He laughed. "You're a legend, Candace. You don't even realize it. Keller's trending on every platform. 3 more women reached out since the article dropped. The paper's servers nearly crashed." I smiled faintly. "Good. Let the truth be heavy." But Jonah's tone softened. "You okay, though? This kind of victory. It's not light," I hesitated. "It doesn't feel like celebration. More like release. That's what justice feels like," he said quietly. By mid-afternoon, the board sent a company-wide memo, effective immediately. Raymond Keller has resigned from his role as Chief Marketing Officer. The company does not condone the actions detailed in recent reports and remains committed to rebuilding trust and integrity within our culture. The words resigned and rebuilding trust were corporate theater. But everyone knew the truth. He'd been forced out in disgrace. Later that evening, I took a walk through Bryant Park. The city lights shimmered against the dark winter sky. People passed by laughing, rushing, living their lives, oblivious to the quiet war that had just ended in my world. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number," I answered cautiously. "Candace." Raymond's voice. For a second, my breath caught. I stopped walking, the cold biting my fingers. "How did you get my number?" "I still have contacts," he said flatly. "You think a little article ruins me?" "A little article?" I repeated, my voice steady. "You mean the one exposing you as a thief and a predator?" He exhaled hard. "You think you've won? You've made enemies, Candace. Powerful ones." I looked up at the lights twinkling above the ice rink, at couples laughing hand in hand. So ordinary, so human. "You built your power on other people's silence," I said. "And now you have to live without it." He didn't answer, so I hung up. And just like that, the ghost of him began to fade. That night, I met with Nicole and Priya at a small wine bar downtown. For the first time in months, their faces weren't tense or cautious. They were alive. Nicole raised her glass. "To the women who refused to stay quiet," Priya smiled. "And to Candace, who lit the match." We clinked glasses. The sound rang like a tiny victory bell. Still, part of me wasn't at peace. The public downfall had been satisfying, yes, but I couldn't shake the ache of everything I'd lost before getting here. My job, my sense of trust, my belief that hard work alone could protect you. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window, scrolling through the endless threads about the scandal. Comments flooded in. Support, outrage, admiration. Strangers were sharing their own stories. Women from different industries wrote about stolen credit, harassment, gaslighting. For the first time, I realized this story wasn't just mine anymore. Jonah texted again. "TV networks want interviews. You don't have to say yes, but you've started something bigger than you think," I typed back. "I'll think about it." Then I closed my phone and just breathed. The revenge had landed. The truth had burned through lies like sunlight cutting fog. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Raymond's fall was just the beginning. The company would scramble, rebuild, rebrand. Others like him would slither back into new roles, new suits, new promises. And me? I wasn't the same woman who'd sat silent in that HR room weeks ago. I had learned that justice isn't handed down. It's carved out. Piece by piece by the people who refuse to disappear. That night, before I went to bed, I opened a blank document on my laptop. At the top, I typed 5 words. "The silence ends with me." And beneath it, an initiative to help women speak up against workplace exploitation and retaliation. Didn't know what it would become yet, but I knew it had to exist. Revenge had brought the fire. Now it was time to build something from the ashes. 3 days after Raymond's resignation, my inbox became a battlefield. Every morning, it filled faster than I could scroll. Reporters, women's organizations, even strangers from other countries. Some messages were short bursts of gratitude. "Thank you for speaking up." Others were long, raw confessions from people who'd lived similar stories and never found the courage to tell them. But there were darker ones too. Anonymous, emails warning me to stay quiet if I value my career. Fake, accounts calling me a liar. A bitter woman trying to destroy a good man's life. It was the digital version of what I'd endured in silence for years. Only now, it was happening in full view of the world. Still, I refused to hide. That Wednesday, the Daily Post invited me for an exclusive interview. Jonah called before I could answer. "Don't say yes right away," he warned. "They'll want to frame you as the scorned woman. The victim. You're not that anymore." "I know," I said quietly, "but maybe I can control the story before they do." He hesitated. "Then own it, Candace. Don't just talk about him. Talk about the system that let him exist." I agreed to the interview. It was filmed in a quiet studio in Midtown. They kept the lighting soft, the tone serious. The host, a sharp, poised journalist named Marissa, smiled warmly when I sat down. "Candace," she began, "the entire city knows your name now. How does it feel to bring down one of the most powerful men in tech?" Her words caught me off guard. Bring down. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone. I just wanted the truth to breathe. "I didn't bring him down," I said slowly. "He built his success on deception. I just stopped helping him hold it up." Marissa leaned forward. "People are calling you a hero. Others say you've ruined lives. What do you say to that?" I met her gaze. "Truth ruins lies, not lives." There was a pause. Then she nodded, visibly moved. "Do you think what happened to you reflects a larger problem in corporate culture?" "Absolutely," I said. "The way companies protect their image instead of their employees, it's a disease. They'll host panels on empowerment while silencing the women who actually need to speak." When the interview aired that night, it spread faster than even the expose had. Clips of my quotes flooded TikTok and YouTube. One line, "Truth ruins lies, not lives," became a trending hashtag. By morning, I wasn't just a name in an article. I was a symbol. And symbols, I soon learned, are both powerful and dangerous. At work, tension simmered like a storm cloud no one wanted to name. HR issued statements about building a safer future. Posters appeared overnight about integrity and accountability. They even added a new internal email signature, "We listen now." The irony was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, my old team barely looked me in the eye. Some whispered "good for her" when they thought I couldn't hear. Others stared like I'd committed a crime. By the end of the week, my manager asked to chat privately. He closed the door gently, then sighed. "You've made quite a name for yourself." I stayed silent. He continued, voice cautious. "The board respects what you did, but the publicity, it's disruptive. Clients are nervous. We think it might be best for everyone if you take some time off." There it was, the polite corporate translation of "you've become too loud for our comfort." "I see," I said. "And how much time off would silence buy you?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Let's call it a month, paid leave. You can use the time to regroup." "Regroup," I repeated, almost laughing. "You mean disappear?" His jaw tightened. "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you said." He looked away. "I'll have HR send the paperwork." When I left the office that day, the air outside felt lighter, almost electric. They thought they could bury me in paid silence, but they'd already lost control of the story. That night, my interview clip reached 1 million views. Women I'd never met tagged me in posts about their own stolen work, toxic bosses and gaslighting supervisors, and then, something unexpected happened. Other employees from the company, men and women, began emailing me confidentially. Screenshots, documents, private messages, proof that Raymond's corruption went far beyond stealing ideas. There were manipulated budgets, falsified reports, even harassment settlements the company had quietly paid off. The truth wasn't just one man's crime. It was institutional rot. I forwarded everything to Jonah. "Jesus," he muttered when he saw the files. "This isn't just a scandal, it's a reckoning." "Then let it burn," I said. By Friday, the Daily Post published a follow-up investigation. Inside the company that protected a predator. The backlash was nuclear. Sponsors pulled out, investors demanded resignations. Within 48 hours, 2 board members and the CEO stepped down for personal reasons. The company's stock plummeted, Raymond's LinkedIn disappeared, and I was free. Still, freedom came with its own shadows. Reporters camped outside my building. Strangers messaged me for advice, therapy, validation. Some days it felt like I'd traded one cage for another. This time, built of expectation. One evening, while scrolling through yet another thread dissecting my life, I found a message buried in the flood. "Hi, Candace. You don't know me, but I used to work under Raymond too. I left after what he did to me was swept under the rug. You gave me the courage to finally tell my story. Thank you." I read it twice, then again. That night, I cried for the first time since everything began, not from pain, but from release. The revenge had been personal, but the justice had become collective. Weeks passed. The company dissolved its old leadership, rebranded under a new name. I was invited back but declined. Instead, I focused on the initiative I'd started. The silence ends with me. What began as a small blog became a movement. Women across industries shared stories, exchanged legal resources, built networks of support. Within months, we had partnerships with advocacy groups and employment lawyers. Jonah called one afternoon, voice bright with pride. "You've started a wildfire, Candace. Companies are holding emergency trainings because of you." I smiled. Good. Maybe next time someone like Raymond won't survive in silence as long as he did. That night, I looked out over the skyline again, the same city that had watched me fall apart and rise stronger. For the first time, the lights didn't just feel like windows of ambition. They felt like tiny beacons, proof that truth, once lit, spreads faster than lies ever could, I whispered to myself. Public reckoning achieved, but deep down, I knew. The real victory wasn't the fall of one man. It was the rise of so many others who finally dared to speak. The noise faded slowly, like a storm moving out to sea. Weeks after the exposé, my phone finally stopped vibrating every 10 minutes. The cameras outside my apartment vanished. My inbox, once flooded with outrage and applause, now sat quietly, an empty echo of the chaos that had consumed my life. But silence didn't bring peace. It brought space, and in that space, the memories I'd been too busy to feel came rushing. In every late night I'd stayed at the office rewriting someone else's vision, every meeting where I'd bitten my tongue to survive, every moment I'd believed being quiet made me stronger. It was like watching my own ghost, the woman who'd once thought endurance was power. The first morning I woke without checking the news. I didn't know what to do with myself. My new project, The Silence Ends With Me, was thriving online, run by volunteers and survivors who had joined after seeing my story. Yet personally, I felt untethered. Revenge had filled every corner of my world, and now that justice was served, the emptiness left behind terrified me. I met Jonah for coffee one chilly Saturday. It had been months since the fallout, and though he'd been instrumental in helping me expose everything, we hadn't had a real conversation since the fire cooled. "You look tired," he said, sliding into the seat across from me at a small cafe in Soho. "I'm fine," I lied. He arched a brow. "Candace, you've just dismantled an empire. You don't have to be fine." I stirred my coffee, watching the steam twist upward. "You ever feel like, once you get justice, you don't know what to do with yourself?" He smiled faintly. "All the time. Justice doesn't fill the whole revenge digs." I looked up, startled by the honesty. "So what fills it?" "Something worth building," he said simply. "Not just tearing down." That stayed with me. Later that week, I visited the office for the first time since I'd been given leave. It wasn't the same company anymore. The lobby had been redesigned, new logo on the wall, new leadership walking the halls. Yet the air still smelled faintly of burned coffee and ambition, the same scent that once defined my life. A few old colleagues spotted me. Some looked away, others smiled awkwardly, unsure whether to greet the woman who'd brought the building to its knees. One, however, walked straight up to me. Denise, a quiet analyst I'd mentored years ago. "Candace," she said, her eyes bright with something between fear and admiration. "I just wanted to say, thank you. Because of what you did, I finally spoke up about my manager. HR actually listened this time. Her voice trembled, but she smiled. You changed everything. I hugged her, something I'd never done in all our years working together. No, Denise, you did. I just gave the silence a crack. As I left the building, I realized how little I missed it. The long hours, the false camaraderie, the quiet compromises. The place had once felt like the center of my world. Now it looked small, just another high-rise full of people pretending everything was fine. That evening, I visited my parents in Brooklyn. They'd followed my story quietly from the sidelines, proud but protective. My mother greeted me at the door, worry lines etched deeper than before. You've lost weight, she said, touching my face. Are you eating properly? I'm eating, I smiled softly. Just not at my desk anymore. Dad was in the living room, reading the paper, a real one, printed and folded, his small rebellion against the digital world. He looked up and grinned. There's my headline maker. Don't call me that, I groaned, flopping onto the couch. Why not? He said, you made history, exposed corruption. I brag about you to everyone at the diner. Mom rolled her eyes but smiled. He does. Every single customer. I laughed, but inside their words landed deeper than they knew. I hadn't felt proud in a while. Just drained. Hearing them say it reminded me that what I did wasn't just destruction, it was change. Later that night, as I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, I found the old corkboard I'd used in high school, filled with faded photos, movie tickets, and a handwritten note from my younger self. One day I'll make my voice matter. I traced the words with my fingertip and whispered, You did, kid. You finally did. The next morning, I took a walk through Prospect Park. The air was sharp, the trees bare but beautiful in their honesty. I'd spent so many years chasing external validation, promotions, praise, perfection. But walking under that open sky, I realized the real victory wasn't the company's downfall or the internet's applause. It was the quiet inside me. The first real quiet I'd ever known. A few days later, the Daily Post reached out again. They wanted to feature a follow-up, not about the scandal, but about what came after. This time I agreed. When Marissa met me again, she said, Your story started a movement. People are calling it the Candace effect. How do you feel about that? I smiled faintly. I think the effect was always there. I just gave it a name. She nodded, impressed. And what's next for you? Helping others find their own names? I replied. When the segment aired, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. The woman who'd once been erased had become impossible to silence. That night, I scrolled through the comments section under the video. One stood out. I watched this while sitting outside my office, trying to decide whether to quit after my boss took credit for my work again. After hearing you, I walked back in and told the truth. Thank you. I closed my eyes, smiling through tears. The chain reaction had begun, and it was bigger than me. That weekend, Jonah visited my new apartment. Smaller, quieter, but filled with light. He looked around, impressed. You look happy, he said. I am, I admitted. It's not the same kind of happiness as before. It's steadier. He raised his coffee mug in a toast. To steady happiness, then. I clinked mine against his, and to never letting silence win again. As the sun dipped over the city skyline, I thought back to that day months ago. The one where I'd stood frozen outside the boardroom, hearing Raymond take credit for everything I'd built. The humiliation, the rage, the breaking, and then the rebuilding. He'd taken my career, but I'd taken back my story, and in the end, that was the kind of victory that outlived every headline. I walked to the window, watching the lights blink across Manhattan, each one a tiny rebellion against the dark. For the first time, I didn't see a battlefield. I saw a beginning. The morning light poured through the window like a soft confession. It had been 6 months since everything changed, since Raymond fell from his throne, since the company that defined my identity for nearly a decade collapsed under the weight of its own lies. 6 months since I reclaimed my voice. But healing, I learned, wasn't a straight road. It twisted and looped back, forcing me to revisit old wounds until they stopped bleeding. Some mornings, I woke up feeling free, light as air. Other days, I still heard his voice in my head. "You're replaceable. Candace." It took time to unlearn the lie. That morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, overlooking the city that had both broken me and built me again. The skyline shimmered in early sunlight, glass towers gleaming like reminders of ambition and ruin all at once. Somewhere in one of those buildings, another woman was probably biting her tongue in a meeting, trying to stay composed while someone else took credit for her brilliance. And I hoped she knew she wasn't alone anymore. After the scandal, my life didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. I left corporate life for good. The corner office, the performance reviews, the late-night urgent calls, all of it stayed behind. What replaced it was quieter but infinitely more meaningful. I started the Open Room, a mentorship community for women in the workplace, a safe space for anyone who'd ever been silenced, manipulated, or erased. What began as a small online support group turned into a nationwide network. We held workshops, partnered with ethics organizations, and helped dozens of women file workplace protection claims. For the first time in my life, my work didn't drain me. It healed me. One evening after a seminar in Chicago, I received a message from a woman named Evelyn. She'd been a senior analyst in a firm much like mine. Her boss had stolen her ideas, buried her voice, and threatened her job when she spoke up. She wrote, "Your story gave me courage. Yesterday I reported him. Today I walked out with my head high. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time, my throat tightening. That one sentence made every sleepless night worth it. A few days later, I met Jonah at the old coffee shop where we'd first plotted my plan. He was doing well, consulting now, teaching part-time, living slower. He looked genuinely happy. "You're still changing the world," he teased, sipping his espresso. "But you look calmer, different." "I'm not fighting anymore," I said quietly. "I'm building," he smiled. "That's the real revenge, isn't it? Outlasting them." He was right. The real victory wasn't destroying Raymond or the company. It was stepping out of the shadows they'd built around me and realizing I never needed their approval in the first place. But there were still ghosts. Some nights, I dream about the boardroom, the projector light flickering against the glass walls, Raymond's voice echoing as he presented my strategy as his own. In the dream, I never interrupted. I just stood there frozen, watching history rewrite itself in real time. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, whispering to myself, "You're not there anymore." It was a mantra I'd learned in therapy. A grounding reminder that the past couldn't reach me unless I invited it in. One Sunday afternoon, as I walked through Central Park, I saw a young woman sitting on a bench, head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Something in me recognized that posture, that quiet, defeated slump of someone who'd just been made to feel small. Without overthinking, I approached her. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. She looked up, startled. "I just got fired. My boss blamed me for something I didn't do." I sat beside her. "That's awful. But trust me, this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something you don't see yet," she sniffled, wiping her eyes. "You sound like you've been there." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I've been there. And I promise. One day, you'll thank the moment that broke you, because it pushed you toward who you were meant to be." We talked for an hour. She didn't know who I was, and I didn't tell her. She didn't need a name. She just needed hope. When she finally smiled, shaky but real, I knew my purpose had come full circle. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was helping others rewrite theirs. That night, back home, I found myself scrolling through old photos, office events, company parties, team dinners. In one of them, I stood beside Raymond, both of us smiling stiffly at the camera. For years, that picture had represented everything I'd lost. But now, looking at it again, it felt different. It wasn't a reminder of betrayal. It was proof that I'd survived it. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, Sometimes the people who bury you don't realize you're a seed. The next day, the open room launched a podcast. The first episode was titled The Cost of Silence. I recorded it from my living room, just me and a microphone, my voice steady but intimate. I told my story, not the scandal, not the revenge, but the truth behind it, the loneliness, the fear, the slow death of confidence that happens when you let others define your worth. Thousands listened. Hundreds wrote in. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. My pain had become someone else's permission to fight back. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten. The return address was unfamiliar. Inside, there was a single line. "You were right about everything. I'm sorry." It was from Raymond. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the shaky handwriting. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He hadn't justified his actions. Just that one line. And strangely, that was enough. Not because it erased what he'd done. Nothing could. But because it proved he'd finally faced the truth. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to the empty room, "I forgive you. But I'll never forget." Forgiveness wasn't surrender. It was release. A week later, standing in front of a full audience at a women's leadership conference, I shared my story publicly for the first time. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. The applause was thunderous. But what moved me most were the quiet moments after, when people came up to say, "You told my story." I realized then, I was never alone. None of us were. That evening, I visited my parents in Brooklyn. They'd followed my story quietly from the sidelines, proud but protective. My mother greeted me at the door, worry lines etched deeper than before. "You've lost weight," she said, touching my face. "Are you eating properly?" "I'm eating," I smiled softly. "Just not at my desk anymore." Dad was in the living room, reading the paper, a real one, printed and folded, his small rebellion against the digital world. He looked up and grinned. "There's my headline maker." "Don't call me that," I groaned, flopping onto the couch. "Why not?" He said, "You made history, exposed corruption. I brag about you to everyone at the diner." Mom rolled her eyes but smiled. "He does. Every single customer." I laughed, but inside, their words landed deeper than they knew. I hadn't felt proud in a while, just drained. Hearing them say it reminded me that what I did wasn't just destruction. It was change. Later that night, as I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, I found the old corkboard I'd used in high school, filled with faded photos, movie tickets, and a handwritten note from my younger self. "One day, I'll make my voice matter." I traced the words with my fingertip and whispered, "You did, kid. You finally did." The next morning, I took a walk through Prospect Park. The air was sharp, the trees bare, but beautiful in their honesty. I'd spent so many years chasing external validation, promotions, praise, perfection. But walking under that open sky, I realized the real victory wasn't the company's downfall, or the internet's applause. It was the quiet inside me, the first real quiet I'd ever known. A few days later, the Daily Post reached out again. They wanted to feature a follow-up, not about the scandal, but about what came after. This time, I agreed. When Marissa met me again, she said, "Your story started a movement. People are calling it the Candace effect. How do you feel about that?" I smiled faintly. I think the effect was always there. I just gave it a name. She nodded, impressed. "And what's next for you?" "Helping others find their own names," I replied. When the segment aired, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. The woman who'd once been erased had become impossible to silence. That night, I scrolled through the comments section under the video. One stood out. I watched this while sitting outside my office, trying to decide whether to quit after my boss took credit for my work again. "After hearing you, I walked back in and told the truth. Thank you." I closed my eyes, smiling through tears. The chain reaction had begun, and it was bigger than me. That weekend, Jonah visited my new apartment, smaller, quieter, but filled with light. He looked around, impressed. "You look happy," he said. "I am," I admitted. "It's not the same kind of happiness as before. It's steadier." He raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To steady happiness, then." I clinked mine against his. "And to never letting silence win again." As the sun dipped over the city skyline, I thought back to that day months ago. The one where I'd stood frozen outside the boardroom, hearing Raymond take credit for everything I'd built. The humiliation, the rage, the breaking, and then the rebuilding. He'd taken my career, but I'd taken back my story. And in the end, that was the kind of victory that outlived every headline. I walked to the window, watching the lights blink across Manhattan, each one a tiny rebellion against the dark. For the first time, I didn't see a battlefield. I saw a beginning. The morning light poured through the window like a soft confession. It had been 6 months since everything changed, since Raymond fell from his throne, since the company that defined my identity for nearly a decade collapsed under the weight of its own lies. 6 months since I reclaimed my voice. But healing, I learned, wasn't a straight road. It twisted and looped back, forcing me to revisit old wounds until they stopped bleeding. Some mornings, I woke up feeling free, light as air. Other days, I still heard his voice in my head. "You're replaceable, Candace." It took time to unlearn the lie. That morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, overlooking the city that had both broken me and built me again. The skyline shimmered in early sunlight, glass towers gleaming like reminders of ambition and ruin all at once. Somewhere in one of those buildings, another woman was probably biting her tongue in a meeting, trying to stay composed while someone else took credit for her brilliance. And I hoped she knew she wasn't alone anymore. After the scandal, my life didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. I left corporate life for good. The corner office, the performance reviews, the late-night urgent calls, all of it stayed behind. What replaced it was quieter but infinitely more meaningful. I started the Open Room, a mentorship community for women in the workplace, a safe space for anyone who'd ever been silenced, manipulated, or erased. What began as a small online support group turned into a nationwide network. We held workshops, partnered with ethics organizations, and helped dozens of women file workplace protection claims. For the first time in my life, my work didn't drain me. It healed me. One evening after a seminar in Chicago, I received a message from a woman named Evelyn. She'd been a senior analyst in a firm much like mine. Her boss had stolen her ideas, buried her voice, and threatened her job when she spoke up. She wrote, "Your story gave me courage. Yesterday I reported him. Today I walked out with my head high. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time, my throat tightening. That one sentence made every sleepless night worth it. A few days later, I met Jonah at the old coffee shop where we'd first plotted my plan. He was doing well, consulting now, teaching part-time, living slower. He looked genuinely happy. "You're still changing the world," he teased, sipping his espresso. "But you look calmer, different." "I'm not fighting anymore," I said quietly. "I'm building," he smiled. "That's the real revenge, isn't it? Outlasting them." He was right. The real victory wasn't destroying Raymond or the company. It was stepping out of the shadows they'd built around me and realizing I never needed their approval in the first place. But there were still ghosts. Some nights, I'd dream about the boardroom, the projector light flickering against the glass walls, Raymond's voice echoing as he presented my strategy as his own. In the dream, I never interrupted. I just stood there frozen, watching history rewrite itself in real time. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, whispering to myself, "You're not there anymore." It was a mantra I'd learned in therapy. A grounding reminder that the past couldn't reach me unless I invited it in. One Sunday afternoon, as I walked through Central Park, I saw a young woman sitting on a bench, head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Something in me recognized that posture, that quiet, defeated slump of someone who'd just been made to feel small. Without overthinking, I approached her. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. She looked up, startled. "I just got fired. My boss blamed me for something I didn't do." I sat beside her. "That's awful. But trust me, this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something you don't see yet," she sniffled, wiping her eyes. "You sound like you've been there." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I've been there. And I promise. One day, you'll thank the moment that broke you, because it pushed you toward who you were meant to be." We talked for an hour. She didn't know who I was, and I didn't tell her. She didn't need a name. She just needed hope. When she finally smiled, shaky but real, I knew my purpose had come full circle. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was helping others rewrite theirs. That night, back home, I found myself scrolling through old photos, office events, company parties, team dinners. In one of them, I stood beside Raymond, both of us smiling stiffly at the camera. For years, that picture had represented everything I'd lost. But now, looking at it again, it felt different. It wasn't a reminder of betrayal. It was proof that I'd survived it. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Sometimes the people who bury you don't realize you're a seed." The next day, the Open Room launched a podcast. The first episode was titled "The Cost of Silence." I recorded it from my living room, just me and a microphone, my voice steady but intimate. I told my story, not the scandal, not the revenge, but the truth behind it. The loneliness, the fear, the slow death of confidence that happens when you let others define your worth. Thousands listened. Hundreds wrote in, and for the first time, I realized something powerful. My pain had become someone else's permission to fight back. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten. The return address was unfamiliar. Inside, there was a single line. "You were right about everything. I'm sorry." It was from Raymond. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the shaky handwriting. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He hadn't justified his actions. Just that one line, and strangely, that was enough. Not because it erased what he'd done. Nothing could. But because it proved he'd finally faced the truth. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to the empty room, "I forgive you. But I'll never forget." Forgiveness wasn't surrender. It was release. A week later, standing in front of a full audience at a women's leadership conference, I shared my story publicly for the first time. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. The applause was thunderous. But what moved me most were the quiet moments after, when people came up to say, "You told my story." I realized then, I was never alone. None of us were. As the event ended, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The city glowed in the distance. Fierce, flawed, alive. I smiled to myself and whispered the words that had carried me through everything. "I am Candace, and they tried to silence me. But they forgot one thing. I don't break quietly." And that was the truth I'd live by for the rest of my life. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't in watching others fall. It's in standing tall long after they're gone. Tell me, what's the one moment in your life that made you realize your silence had power?